जी, start recording and all right. So we're beginning today with philosophy and Islam. And your first reading is True Nature of Prophecy. So what comes into your mind when we're talking about prophecy? What is prophecy? I say some people translate this prophethood, this particular reading, but what do you understand by the word prophecy?
Ma'am, by predicting something
Okay, so predicting something,
for the
prediction.
future.
Okay, ठीक है. Anyone else?
Ma'am,
Miss
the
would
ability.
know beforehand. Like, okay, sorry. Can you say that again, please? I was saying that you know things that other people don't. मतलब beforehand.
Miracle, ma'am.
Maybe I can put that as knowledge. Unseen knowledge, perhaps. If you're saying other people don't know. Yes, yes, unseen knowledge. That's a better way. Thank you.
Ma'am, to predict danger, but nobody believes you.
Okay, so again, that would be in prediction. That
Miracle,
comes
ma'am.
under. And some of you said, gee, sorry, can you repeat that again? I didn't get that.
Miracle, ma'am. Miracle.
Gee,
Mojisa. Miracle, ma'am. Miracle.
I'm so sorry, मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही. Okay, miracle. Prophecy would be a miracle, yes. I mean, you could say that. So prophecy itself is a miracle. Okay, so some of you are defining it as prophethood itself. Okay, so I was wanting to look at the linguistic meaning of prophecy, but yes, that is almost covered in prediction, unseen knowledge. Revelation from God. All right, so this piece of writing is written by Imam Ghazali, and I've introduced him a little bit previously as well in class, but I will do that again because he is a person who is very, very well known. In fact, he is also known as Mujaddid. What does Mujaddid mean? Maybe some of you who have good Urdu may understand this. It's actually an Arabic word coming from Jadid.
Yes.
Mujaddid means renewer, okay? Someone who renews something. So he is the Mujaddid, or even known as proof of Islam, Hujjatul Islam. So some people argue that he is actually one of the most influential people after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? Why is that? So Imam Ghazali was born in a family. His father was not a scholar. So it was you can say a mediocre family in terms of intellectual scholarship of Islam. However, he had one uncle who was an alim, you can say. An alim would be translated as a scholar of Islamic knowledge, right? But his father did appreciate scholars. So he had this love of learning and he wanted his kids to become scholars, even though he himself was not. So when he passed away, he sort of gave their children in the care of that uncle and he wanted them to learn about the Islamic scholarly tradition. And Imam Ghazali came to be known as one of the geniuses of that time. Okay, so sometimes it is possible that a genius doesn't get the same environment that sort of facilitates that person to use that genius and improve in his knowledge, but he was given that atmosphere because this was a time in Islamic history which was very lively, okay, in terms of intellectual debate, intellectual growth of the Islamic sciences. That includes theology, that includes logic. So he was pretty much genius at everything. If he went into an argument with someone, he would win. Okay, so he was very good with logic and rhetoric, and then he was very good with the fiqh. Okay, so usulul fiqh. He ended up writing Ihya Ulumuddin. Ihya means revival. Hayat se aata hai. ठीक है. Ulum is the plural of ilm. Ulumuddin, and deen is religion. So Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences. It is supposed to be an M, which doesn't look like an M. Okay. G. Okay, sure. Yes, please do that. Is it hard to read? Okay. Okay, so this is actually a book of 40 volumes. Well, thanks to my son, we are getting these weird updates. He has this new passion for Godzilla. I always hated it whenever I heard of it, but yes, that's his new. I was so happy when he used to love dinosaurs, and now suddenly this new thing he's started to like. Okay, so 40 volumes of Ihya Ulumuddin. Now, revival of the religious sciences is ki puri ek story hai. So what you're going to read now, True Nature of Prophecy, he wrote this. This is a part of his autobiography, in fact. Okay. And he wrote this autobiography after, I think I mentioned, I don't know if you remember, but he went through a spiritual, you can call it, crisis. Okay. How did that happen? So his teacher was Juwaini. Okay. Imam al-Juwaini. That's a U and a W. You can write it like this, Juwaini. And the teacher called his student, i.e. Imam Ghazali, an ocean of knowledge, but he said an ocean that you can drown in. Okay. अब आप ये देखें, some people call this a double-edged sword. Okay. So an ocean that you can drown in. If you're talking about an ocean, yes, it's vast, it's deep, it can, bring you a lot of knowledge, right? And there's so much that you don't know about that ocean. But when you say that you can drown in, it sort of gives it a negative connotation. So what did he mean? Now, if a teacher, I think, says that about a student, it sort of tells you the genius of this man, right? And he became, some people say late 20s, some people say early 30s, but he became one of the leading professors, admin, you can say, of the university in Baghdad at that time. You can call that, you can also say that that's like being a lead professor in Harvard at that time. Okay? So this was a huge deal because usually it was the older students who ended up getting that level of status. Okay? So he was very well known. And there were people in thousands that used to come and attend his lectures. So not just his own students, but people came as auditors and listened to his lectures in the masjid. Now, while this was happening, he started having certain doubts, he calls them. Okay? Doubt about what really is. So what is epistemology? This is also for your quiz. I mean, if you're reading up on human origins, which we did last time, it is the question of what really is. Yani, how do you know what really exists, what really is, right? This is a theory of knowledge, you can say. How do you know what is? Okay, that is epistemology. So he had doubts about how you can prove God. And I'm putting that very crudely, right? But what he was saying is that I was teaching and then suddenly I had this phase of my life in which I could not teach anymore. He started having these doubts, but he kept on teaching until one day he said that I couldn't teach anymore. So he calls that like a knot on his tongue. Okay? That's this. And he says that I couldn't teach anymore because this was like a spiritual ailment of sorts. Okay, so he went to the doctor and he's saying nothing is wrong with you, but he's like, I just cannot teach anymore. Okay, what's wrong with me? So he says that he spent quite a lot of time in this, and then I'm not going to tell you the conclusion first. Let's put a star here. So I'm going to put that here. But what he did was that for 2 years, he studied the philosophers. Because what are the philosophers saying? Remember, we talked about this at the beginning of the course, that philosophy means the love of wisdom. So the philosophers are telling you what is a good life. Okay? And in that, they're talking about, logic and rationality. Has anyone heard of Descartes? Nobody? So what did, oh, I pressed something, scribbled. So Descartes said, can I turn this off? I don't know. Not that technical. Look at this. This is so interesting. I'm sorry. So I press this here and then it's just giving me these squiggles. It should turn off. Okay, it's off. So Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Okay, he's saying, how do I know I exist? Maybe I'm an illusion. So Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So the nature of thought of human beings itself is so intense and so different. Like you can think about things that are in front of you, observe, and come to conclusions about certain facts around you. But you can also imagine things that are not there, that are not observable. So this diversity of human thought, he said, is sort of proof of that you exist. If you're not just an illusion. I think, therefore I am. Okay. Now Imam Ghazali wrote a refutation. First, he actually wrote about the philosophers. So what he studied in 2 years, he sort of reviewed that, and wrote a book about the philosophers. And then he wrote a refutation. So one was Tahafutul Falasifa, and the second was Munqidh min ad-Dalala. Well, sorry, that is the autobiography. Munqidh min ad-Dalala is deliverer from error. So his autobiography is called The Deliverer from Error. So when he writes a refutation of the philosophers, he's not refuting all of philosophy. So some people misunderstood that and they thought that he's saying that there's no need of philosophy at all. However, what he said was there were certain types of philosophy. So for example, he does heavily criticize Ibn Sina, Avicenna. Okay? So because he disagrees with the way that, with his philosophy, you can say. And if you remember Human Origins, we did 3 types of different people who were trying to look at this conflict between religion and science, right? And Ibn Sina went more towards rationality, if you remember. And Imam Ghazali sort of bridges the two. And then Ibn Taymiyyah also bridges the two, but he sort of says that at the end of the day, revelation is the highest. Okay? So Ghazali was criticizing Ibn Sina in his refutation of the philosophers. However, when you read his autobiography, Deliverer from Error, and again, a deeper reading of all of his works tell you that he's not really refuting all of philosophy. Okay, it's just that the way philosophy is dealt with within the Islamic tradition, that's where you have kalam. Kalam is essentially rational, intellectual debate about theology. It's a debate about theology, but which has rationality in it. Okay, that is essentially kalam. That's the philosophy of the Islamic world, you can say. Okay, so in his autobiography, he then writes about this time in which he couldn't teach, and then he says that then God opened up my heart. ये जो एक point है ना, you'll come to that when we're doing Islamic spirituality, which is the last module of the course. We're also going to read that part of Deliver from Error when he writes exactly about what he went through, right? What went through his mind when he was going through this period of doubt in his teaching. Sorry. I'm going to have a little bit of my tea before it gets all cold. Okay, so for these 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you about the doubts that you might have had, or people around you might have had, about religion, just about Islam, or maybe things that, I don't know, things that you want to point out, things that you want to know more about. So you can type, you can unmute your mic and say it. And those of you who are present here, you guys can go ahead and I'll jot them down. Okay? So we'll start with that before we go into what Ghazali is saying. Okay, so anything at all, we can brainstorm and let me know anything. It could be a doubt, or it could be just, any parts of religion that make you think like there's a gap, like you don't really get it, or there's something missing. I don't know, like a missing piece in the puzzle. Then we can open that up throughout the course, if not today. जी जी हिदायतुल्लाह जी जी ओके हज एंड फास्टिंग, यानी आप कह रहे हैं ज़कात तो समझ आती है क्योंकि वो आप मदद करें दूसरों की, राइट? ठीक है, ये 3 चीजें। ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है, असल मकसद क्या है? ठीक है, ओके, अच्छा, यानी एक अकीम सलाह का जो ट्रांसलेशन है वो अ, आपको याद है वर्ड क्या था पैकेज में, जो आपको पसंद आया था? तो याद होना चाहिए। um, ठीक है, anyone else, any other thing? So we put down
I have a question regarding origin.
जी, okay,
Ma'am, in
okay,
Quran, Allah Ta'ala,
जी जी जी
in Quran Kareem, Allah Ta'ala says that خلق الإنسان في أحسن تقويم. يعني हमने हर
जी
इंसान को बेहतर पैदा कर दिया. And even some women give birth to disabled children. We can say that we are أحسن تقويم. But what about the disabled persons which give birth to disabled children at their starting? So explain it, ma'am.
okay, disability, I'm just going to put one word here, ठीक है? So basically disability, disease भी आ जाता है, यानी अल्लाह ताला ने इंसान को खूबसूरत, अहसन का वर्ड यूज हुआ है, also coming from एहसान, right? खूबसूरत मॉडल पे बनाया या खूबसूरत तरीके से बनाया. But what about disability? Anybody else? So there's some things in the chat here, जी. Mhm. Can I write here murder? ठीक है. Anybody else? Mhm. Right. Yes. Okay. हमने क्यों चूज किया कि हम ह्यूमंस बने? Why not angels? ठीक है? Why did we choose humanity, being from humans instead of angels? So would you agree if somebody asks you today that you would rather be an angel? Okay, so the difference of opinion here is maybe, okay, but yes, it's an interesting question. Anybody else? Okay, life after death, okay. Chale. Anybody else? justice system. Ji.
And if we are given
Somebody-
punishment if we are given punishment according to Islamic laws, like for stealing, if our hands are cut down, and in the life after here, will also be given punishment, or is it just ended in the world if it is given according to the laws of Islam?
Okay, let me put this down as punishment in dunya. And question is also in hereafter. Sorry. We'll go to heaven. We'll have women. Acha. So we're getting into the very tiny details, but yes, the whores. Okay, let's put this here. It's a big thing, yes. Acha. Age of the universe. Chale. Wouldn't that be more scientific in nature? I think science can tell us better, no? Even chale. That's honestly out of my
Sorry. Just the fact that it differs according to Islamic researchers and scientific researchers. So probably that.
Okay, I get it. So the ठीक है कि आप किस चीज को लेंगे. अच्छा, I have, but I don't think Islamically, I don't think in scripture you're ever really told the age as such. Like you can sort of guess, right? But it's not really factual in nature. So I would say that for that, you like Islam always says that you go for science, right? Unless whatever science is telling us is conflicting with scripture at any point. So yeah, but let me know. Maybe I don't have, the source that you're talking about. If there is anything that you can share that. Okay, so there are two people I think on site who are asking G. आप कर लें पहले?
As I was talking about, I get confused a lot about my spiritual purification of the soul. I get a lot of
Questions on that?
regarding that.
यानी है क्या वो ये वाली बात?
किस तरीके से प्यूरिफाई होता है सोल और क्या होता है हमारे मरने के बाद आफ्टर हमारे मरने के बाद हमारे रूह के साथ क्या होता है?
अच्छा, ओके चलें ठीक है. Any your question? हाँ जी आपका. Different है, I would say. Science, religion को follow करिए या religion science को, they're different spheres basically. ये understanding है, ठीक है? Okay, so again वही बात के इंसान का फितरा है. This वैसे I think कि मैंने पहले आपको थोड़ा सा मतलब I've sort of touched upon it in a lecture before. So I hope one of you can tell the answer to this. But I'll repeat it just in case. Okay.
Ma'am.
So, जी.
Ma'am, in Alam Arwah, God asked us to be, we will be sent to the earth, and we didn't knew that. But God asked us, and it is also mentioned in Quran कि हमने ज़मीन और आसमान के इस बोझ के बारे में पूछा तो पहाड़ों ने मना कर दिया, लेकिन इंसानों ने इसको तस्लीम कर लिया. So we don't even.
अभी किसी ने पूछा था on site भी, और जो म्यूजिक का है. Okay, how about so Muhammad Hamza, I can, क्योंकि इस पे मैं अभी बात नहीं करूंगी, but there's a book, I don't even remember the name, I think Rolling Stone, क्या नाम? नहीं, Slippery Stone. Slippery, I hope that's the right name. I think it's Slippery Stone by Khalid Beg. He's done this research on everything regarding music. So if you're interested, you could look for that. I'm not sure if it's in our library. Chale, let's start from the beginning now. I'm not taking any more questions. Abhi, theek hai? So abhi ke liye we're going to start all the way from prayer, hajj and fasting. But like before that, let me think. Okay, what do I want to do? So prayer, fasting and hajj. Maybe I'm thinking maybe I can ask like some of you in class if you guys want to share what is your view on it. But before that, we started with Imam Ghazali's doubt. Okay? The doubt that he had was essentially in just honestly, like when you're saying like what truly is, you're even thinking about God himself, right? How do you know God exists? Okay. And now this is a person who is teaching thousands of people, and everybody has recognized his genius. His teacher said he's an ocean in which you can drown. And now this person is having this doubt, okay? Which is why he cannot teach anymore. Acha, what is the solution? Does he say that I studied these philosophers and that is why I got the answer? Or does he say I went to the Sufi path, which he did after all of this, getting to know the philosophers and knowing that there's some good in it, a lot of good in it, but then some problems with it, he went on the Sufi path. Because of around 10 years, he left his teaching job, and his seniors were actually baffled. Why is he doing this? Okay, why is he leaving at that point, which was one of the best statuses that you can achieve? यानी it's not even कि एक होता है ना कि हम कहते हैं कि individually एक इंसान एक status पे पहुंच गया है, ठीक है? एक है कि आप पूरी society कह रही है that he has one of the best statuses that you can achieve, and he's helping others, and what else does he want, right? And he didn't have any issues with the admin there, कोई लड़ाई or some misunderstanding, ऐसा भी कोई मसला नहीं था. So why is he leaving? And he decided to go on his own soul searching. So एक answer जो आपका spiritual soul purification का आ रहा है, यहाँ पे question आ रहा है, he wanted to do that, and he's saying that this life that I'm leading right now, teaching everyone and sort of having achieved the highest purpose, okay? And we're talking about within religion, we're not even saying something that he achieved of dunya, but even in the deen, he felt that there was something missing, okay? So he went on that soul searching journey. And before we even do that, because that's coming up later, that reading is coming up later when he talks about this. What he says essentially is that it's sort of presence with God. When we talk about, when we talk about Sufism, when we talk about even ihsan, so doing things in the most beautiful manner is all about having presence with God. Okay? And what does that mean? It means, for example, आप खुद note करें, अच्छा COVID के time में भी हम, I think we can reflect on that as well, that some of us, if not all of us, felt that slowing down helped us a lot. Why did that help? Like we were on this rush, running around, getting our chores done, jobs done, but then suddenly slowing down and just noticing other things helped a lot. So can somebody share that? Like, did anyone feel that, or maybe you know someone else who really went through like a transformative time in, well, last year simply? So it could be online or it could be here. या आप खुद अगर नहीं भी हैं तो आपने किसी का सुना हो. Okay, so somebody is saying Hussein Askari went through it. Okay. Okay.
Sat down and spend some quality time together. Not even my immediate family, like my even like my aunts and everyone. I think that's when I realized that like slowing down time, it really like helped us with a lot of family time together.
Okay, mashallah, yeah. I think we felt that too. Even if we were in another city, even just like WhatsApp messages became so different. Like we were just, the group became so more active and more and deeper again. So the quality time, like you're saying, I think increased for a lot of us who thought that way. ठीक है, तो I think appreciation of your family members is something that could have happened last year. And why did it happen is because we slowed down and we spent that time. So with the time ki investment in relationships, that's crucial. And actually everything requires time. Every single thing requires time. Okay? A lot of times we're just rushing around and wanting something without wanting to put time in it. Okay? So a recent example, again, it's, अपनी एज के जो सारे इश्यूज होते हैं वो याद आ रहे हैं. So like one of my helpers, she wanted work, and it's been like 1 or 2 months. Two of them have been asking work, and now I found a woman who was looking for someone to help her cook. Okay, and when I tell them this really good opportunity, they just don't want to do it. Why? Because they think कि अच्छा उनको नहीं आता. Like, you know, the type of cooking that she'll need, we won't be able to do it. But I was trying to convince them कि आप अगर ये शुरू अभी करेंगी तो 5 साल बाद आपको फायदा होगा इसका. You'll be like, I'm so glad I started this. You learn different dishes. Now you can go anywhere and get a job, right? So why not start? Why not put in time? Just to give you an example, like knitting का क्या कहा जाता है, I don't know how to knit, but knitting का कहा जाता है, it can give a lot. It has a lot of therapeutic effect. अब होता क्या है कि हम लोग ने experience नहीं किया, but our grandmothers have experienced it. Everybody had a dadi nani who was knitting sweaters for us, right? What did it do for them? वो जो बैठ के आप एक ही चीज कर रहे हैं, it's like a monotonous same stitch that you're doing again and again and again and again, and you come up with something whole. वो एक स्वेटर जो आपको एंड में मिला है, अब हम सोचते हैं कि बस खरीद लें, क्या फायदा, मतलब why? For example, I think अगर आपको स्टिचिंग आती भी हो, ठीक है, and you have so much to do, even me for example, I would say कि मैं ready-made जाकर ले लूं, ठीक है, that makes sense because it's less time, it's already made, and you just go and get it. But then if you actually slow down and think कि नहीं ये मैंने एक project करना है and let me do it, तो उसकी जो end में achievement इंसान को महसूस होती है ना, that's not matchable to anything else. And when we realize that, तो हम at least कुछ चीजों में time लगाने के लिए राजी हो जाते हैं. We don't realize this until we don't experience it. So similarly, relationships may be waqt dena. And honestly, this year, prayer, Hajj, fasting, just prayer and Hajj, because fasting, you're right, कि आप सोच सकते हैं, it's good for your health. There are other health benefits. There are sort of discipline कर रहे हैं अपने आप को आप, बहुत सारी और बातें. But what about prayer and Hajj? Doesn't really make sense, like you're saying. Like, what is the purpose behind it? It's you putting in that time for yourself and for Allah. Like your relationship with God, how else are you going to work on it? You're being present with God could be, yes, you can say that you're helping humanity. There are many other ways, right? I mean, even spending time with your family or looking at a tree, the leaves are rustling in the wind. Some of us can look at that and remember God. We can be present with God when we notice these things, right? And which is why I would say nothing that humanity has done is, nothing is, Urdu ka word aa raha hai, faltu, theek hai, but nothing is, how else would you put it? Ji, pointless keh le, haan. I mean, look at literature. Those of you who enjoy literature know what I'm talking about. Okay? You read a good piece of literature and you think of God. I mean, and you just think of the complexity of human nature, of psychology, of the universe, of everything, honestly, right? So, अब literature अगर ये कर सकती है, so here, so let's look at Hajj also. ठीक है? Hajj में क्या होता है? We're remembering what Hajra alayhi salam did. ठीक है? So her story about, being in Makkah with an infant, and there's no help there. ठीक है? There's no other human there that can help her potentially. Pani wahan pe available nahi hai, which is the source of life, and apparently her husband just abandoned her. What would we feel like? I mean, hum kahenge ke bas Allah Ta'ala doesn't care about me. Like you're saying Allah loves me, ye to bahut hi dur ki baat hai. Like there's no concern from that source. I mean, that's what I would feel, right? That's what we would feel. But क्यों ऐसा, मतलब हम भी जब स्टोरी भी पढ़ते हैं तो हम सोचते हैं क्यों, ठीक है, बच्चा भी सवाल करता है भाई why did this happen. असल बात ये है कि अल्लाह ये हमें देखें बता रहे हैं कि एक तो कि सोर्स क्या है, हर चीज की सोर्स क्या है. You don't have water and then what happened? It sprang out from the feet of Ismail alayhi salam, ठीक है, the son. अब वो जो पानी का निकलना था, you see, is that the source of, what you can call that a source, right? But you can also see that because it's a miracle, some people can make that connection. They can say that no, it's a miracle, it's coming from God. Okay, but let's suppose the angel wasn't there. कहते हैं ना कि angel ने वो अपनी heel वहां पे sort of tap key, and that's where the water came from. Zamzam, which is till today you can scientifically prove it's healing in nature. Zamzam is a miraculous water, ठीक है? मतलब उसका जो well है उसमें वो नहीं लगता, fungal नहीं है, it's not, there's no fungus on it. So ये scientifically proven है. But I mean, a person can think maybe if even the angel wasn't there, हो सकता है कि कोई natural source था, किसी natural source की वजह से उनको वहां पे पानी मिल गया, and it might not have apparently been a miracle, but the idea of just water existing on this world is for a believer a miracle in itself. ठीक है? H2O, it's hydrogen and oxygen, right? पानी बन गया, and then it's a source of life. There are a lot of things. ठीक है? हज में ये है कि everybody comes together and there is no difference in the status. Everybody is equal before the eyes of God. So you're going back to that primordial nature. और बल्कि अभी philosophy of Islam में एक है reading, which is Sunnah as primordiality. It's coming up. These are smaller readings, and I forgot my package today, unfortunately. But true, just hold on. I'll ask you definitely, Jazakallah. So, because in True Nature of Prophecy, what Imam Ghazali says in the very first paragraph, so I remember that, you can open that up. He says that there are the five senses, like how do we know what exists? So he says there are the five senses. And then he says there is perception. I think he uses the word discretion, if you guys can read and see and tell me. यानी जब एक बच्चा थोड़ा सा बड़ा होता है, five senses, छोटा toddler जो है वो क्या करता है? That he is using his five senses to make sense of his words. So he's putting everything is in his mouth. What does that mean? एक तो touch करके उसको पता लग रहा है कि कोई चीज soft है, कोई चीज सख्त है. He's looking at it, right? Then he also wants to taste it. That's a way of a toddler trying to make sense of everything around them. ठीक है? Learning from around their surroundings. फिर एक age होती है जिसमें वो discretion पे पहुंचते हैं. They get to know these relationships. The way Imam Ghazali explains is that he's saying they understand the relationships around them. So they might figure out, like by age 6, they know कि ये मेरी फूफो है, अब्बू की बहन है, this is my khala, this is my mom's sister. ये चीजें शुरू में नहीं पता होती, but over time, at a certain age, they sort of make these differences. They can understand these nuances. ठीक है? Then he says, the intellect, the intellect of man, right? अच्छा, अब example एक इसकी ये दी जाती है कि so you might, वही mountain एक आपको नजर आ रहा है, ठीक है? You might see, if you measure it from far away, it might be just 4 inches tall, लेकिन because इंसान की अकल जो बढ़ती जाती है, ठीक है? You know at one point in your life that it's not 4 inches, it's actually miles high, ठीक है? How do you know that? Because you know कि आपकी जो senses हैं उनमें eyesight जो है वो आपको एक चीज बता रही है, but your intellect is telling you much more than that. You can't just rely on your eyesight and say it's 4 inches tall, ठीक है? So this is what he is arguing. And then he says beyond that is prophecy. So to some extent you can argue कि अच्छा maybe it's not intellectual also. मतलब argue कर सकते हैं ना? Intellectually speaking, you cannot make sense of it. What is prophecy? आप समझ रहे बात? यानी rationally speaking, जो आपका brain आपको बता रहा है, is it accordingly possible or not? अब ये एक वो बात है कि एक philosophical argument हो गया. You can either say it's higher than intellect, and your intellect cannot make sense of it, or some people can argue that it is exactly equal to my rationality. Yani it's exactly what our rationality is going to point at. अब वो कैसे पहुंचेंगे? Remember what Ibn Taymiyyah said? कि logic is taking me back to revelation. Logic itself is saying that I am a complex human being on earth. ठीक है? My level of imagination, consciousness is such that there is no other creature or creation around me that is like it. And this has to be designed. If it's designed, then somebody has to design it. So there is a watchmaker, there is an intelligent designer. And then that intelligent designer must have contacted me in some way. So we understand it's the prophets through whom Allah contacts us. So वो कह रहे हैं मतलब उसमें this is a philosophical argument. You go on and that's what different philosophers have done. ठीक है? Or different kalam, you can say scholars, kalam scholars in Islam. So I'm going to put this down again and again. It's already 9:35. Acha. Okay, now can one of you read out from the third page, like your first page, page second and third page pe, when he starts talking about doubt. I think I've already put a star beside it, so you'll be able to. When he describes the types of doubt. I think it's the third page or no? Any single page जो है ना उस हिसाब से third है. Okay. दिखाते हैं वीडियो. हाँ जी, you can go ahead. Okay, let me put this down. So doubt in prophecy, he says, is it could be doubt in its possibility, or sorry, you'll have to repeat it for us. Of its actual occurrence, doubt of its actual occurrence. Okay, attainment by a specific person. So he is particularly, अच्छा अब let's suppose देखें. So because जो मैंने आपको background दिया है, autobiography में he writes that, you know, there was a light put in his heart by God. कि वो जो एक तंगी हो रही थी दिल में, that was expanded, right? There was a Shara Sadr at one point after months. And he says that God again sort of gave me that light. ठीक है? यानी जो ईमान का, he felt like that doubt was there. That was lifted by God. So you can argue, I mean, आप कह सकते हैं कि भाई rationally तो फिर भी कोई मतलब answer नहीं आया. You guys can keep thinking all of this, ठीक है? And I want you guys to think about it. But he's saying that this is what happened, that God opened his heart. But even after that, he was still looking for the truth. यानी philosophers का जो सारा उन्होंने study किया है, 2 साल लगाए हैं. That's not little, right? Spending 2 years studying all of the philosophers. What are they saying? What are the different philosophers saying? And then he's writing this book when he comes up with these 5 senses and intellect and prophecy, right? So then he says, okay, prophethood. क्योंकि देखिए, how are we coming to know God? One is the fitra, we know God, but then we want to know more about God. We want to know his attributes, his everything, like why he sent Hajar into Makkah. How am I going to get an answer? I want to know who he is. I want to know his attributes. What is the purpose of life? ये सारे questions आप देख लें थोड़े से related है. So he's saying कि देखिए आपको अगर prophethood का पता लगता है कि ये फला इंसान prophet है, एक आपको doubt हो सकता है उसकी possibility में कि prophecy क्या वाकई exist भी करती है, like honestly, like can you know about the future, like rationally जो हम हर चीज समझते हैं उसके ऊपर कोई चीज हो सकती है क्या prophecy. So he's saying the possibility. How can you question this? Maybe you can put a what here. So there's a doubt in what really prophecy is and its possibility. Acha. Second doubt could be its actual occurrence. कि चलो ठीक है मैं मानती हूँ कि prophecy जैसी कोई चीज हो सकती है. Like maybe I know someone. I remember once I had a class fellow who said she used to feel she had this intuition before anything happened, which was very weird and very new for me. Like I think that's the only person in my life that I met who said something like that. Okay. She used to get these 6 like really strong 6 senses. I don't know. I really don't know the anything about it other than that. I just know that she had that and she shared that. But the point is that let's suppose somebody believes that कि prophecy जैसी कोई चीज है. Now the second doubt that a person can have is did Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam actually get that? Yani kya waqi wo prophet the sorry, that's the third one, right? Attainment by a specific person. Did he actually receive that prophecy, right? So is, the doubt about prophethood could also be about that particular individual. I can question that as not, I don't think it's a very good way to write this actually. Let's just go with what he's written, okay? So the possibility of its occurrence, the actual occurrence, so did it really happen the way we know it to have happened? So again, all of this is about prophethood. Okay? The possibility of prophethood, the actual occurrence of prophethood, and the attainment by a specific person, which is how you would become a Muslim. If you look at it in another way, I could say I believe in God, but I'm not a Muslim. Why would you not be a Muslim is when you don't really believe that Prophet Muhammad was the messenger of God. So you see how this is, how he's thinking, how Imam Ghazali is sort of wanting to come to this truth that he knows to be the truth in his heart, but he wants to sort of prove it now as well. Also, let me just sort of give you this, sideline story that there was one student of a teacher and he was near his death. Okay? So at his deathbed, he was sort of getting, how they say that a lot of people have near death experiences, and they say that either old relationships, like old relatives, come up to them and may say something or the other, or they may be visited by shaitan in the image of someone or as shaitan. Allahu alam, Allah knows best. So he was sort of having this dialogue, this debate with the devil, right, with shaitan, who was saying that God does not exist. And so this person, the student, being a student of knowledge, is giving all the rational answers that he has learned in theology. So he's giving all these proofs of why God exists. And then he gives an anti-argument. He gives another one. So they're having this debate. And then because he's sort of in the throes of death, he sort of passes away for a few moments. And the teacher visited him. So वो teacher आता है, and then he asks the teacher, he tells him what has been happening, and उसने ये जवाब दिया और मैंने ये जवाब दिया. And then the teacher goes, why didn't you tell him that I believe without any proof? I just believe. It's a belief at the end of the day. हम उसी चीज को actually question करते हैं, right? Like, how can I believe in this? Because I want proof. And that's completely okay, because that's what Imam Ghazali is doing in this reading, right? That's what he's trying to prove it. But at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, what happened was it was God who put that light in his heart. So whatever argument you come up with, at the end of the day, belief is in the unseen. जो यकीन, जो belief है हमारा, ईमान है किस चीज पर, it's at something that is unseen, right? And that is a lot of times, that is why, did I say this in the last class? I'm sorry if I'm repeating it, but there is a dua which is very simple. Amantu billahi. Well, okay, that's actually a different one. ठीक है? That's a longer one, जिसमें वो articles of faith भी आते हैं. ठीक है? एक और है रदीतु बिल्लाहि रब्बन, that I am razi with Allah as my Rabb, wa bil Islami deenan, and with Islam as my religion, wa bi Muhammadin nabiyyan, and with the Prophet Muhammad as my Nabi. So I'm razi, I'm content with this. Very simple dua, and maybe when you're reading it for the first time, you don't really feel that contentment. But try Googling it. 3 terms hai. Raditu billahi. Raditu comes from raza, which is being radi, which means being content. Okay? And this was sort of taught to us by the Prophet in times when we are anxious or when there's doubt in our hearts, to read this not with the intention कि बस मैंने पढ़ ली and I'm not gonna rationally think about anything, not thinking that it's wrong to think about anything, but to give yourself time. क्योंकि अभी हमारे पास time खत्म हो गया और हमने इतनी सारी चीजें लिखी थी और हमने कुछ भी नहीं किया, like 2 चीजें की सिर्फ शायद, right? So not even the spiritual soul, that's going to come in the last module. But I just literally touched upon prayer and Hajj. So everything else, it's written down here, and we'll look at it again. In fact, let me take a screenshot, because instead of coming back to this video, I can look at the screenshot, and we can try and cover this slowly and gradually, inshallah, throughout the course. Okay? So somebody said, please show us a video. I will gladly do that since there is a short one that I intended to show you. So this is on empathy. And because the purpose of humanity is to be present with God, right, with Allah, one of the things that does is also to be present with the creation of Allah. यानी जब हम इंसानों को, even जानवरों को, nature को देखते हैं, अल्लाह ताला की creation को, it makes us remember the creator, right? So empathy is a lost sunnah. Empathizing is higher than sympathy. Sympathy को भी मुझे define करना मुश्किल हो रहा है, but empathy means that you are sort of, you're able to put yourself in the shoes of another person, like actually feeling what they're feeling, which is a very high level, okay? So this is just a short video on empathy by, again, Brené Brown.
What is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. To me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark.
Sorry, I think they might want a link क्योंकि आवाज से इतना नहीं जाती. So I'll. Oh, yeah. Can you share that with the whole group? I just shared it privately, I think. Hold on.
I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you went down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, woo! It's bad, huh? No. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I have it, yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
And I'm sure, mashallah, since I've got a very good diverse class, I'm sure one of you, two of you, some of you might be thinking, कि कई दफा ऐसा होता है, right, that you actually want a good friend to give you hard, true feedback, right? You just don't want them to listen, but you want good feedback. But then you can ask for that. That's the point. Don't give unsolicited advice. That's the point, right? And a lot of times we give advice thinking it's helping, but the other person just wants to share their burden. And just when somebody listens, that is enough. And we can regulate ourselves and we know what is right and we can come to that conclusion ourselves. Lekin हाँ कई दफा ऐसा होता है that the person does need help in the sense that they are unable to, for whatever reason, unable to see what needs to be seen, right? And then as a friend you feel responsible. So in that case, असल बात connection की उसने end में की है. असल बात ये कि पहले आप ये देखें कि आपका ये connection है कि नहीं. आपका जब वो bond होगा, जब वो relationship इतना strong हो, bond strong हो, तो फिर फर्क बात होती है. A lot of times nobody cares about that. We just care about मेरी जहाँ पर कुरान में है ये जो हमने शुरू में बात की थी जिस पे हमने we couldn't really open it up because of again lack of time, and hopefully this will help at this point. अमर बिल मारूफ नहीं अनिल मुनकर का जो concept है उसमें जो wisdom है वो यही है कि you're the person you are giving that good advice to and stopping from anything negative. You have a good relationship with them. If you don't, it's never going to work, right? तो सबसे जरूरी चीज जो है वो connection है और relationship है. And with that, we'll end the class. And tomorrow, inshallah, you have a quiz, and it'll again be online. The class will be online. So right after the quiz, we'll take the class online because it's very hard to do it, you know, both on site and online. So inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow online. And again, if there are any questions regarding the quiz, then you can ask me on WhatsApp or email me or ask me after class. Okay, Allah Hafiz. So if no more questions, I'm going to end the meeting right now since it's 9:51 and there's another class after us. Okay, Assalamu alaikum.